Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is just Kelly Vlogs and I'm Kelly. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm a little nervous today, so full disclaimer, you'll probably see a lot of like hair flipping and moving around and stuff, and that's just because I'm a little bit nervous. Today is January 9th. So when you guys are seeing this, it's January 9th. And it is officially my first year of being a Christian. The first year of having given my life to Christ, at least like being fully devoted, and it's been a year. It was 2020. It's my first year, and so I think I mentioned a long time ago that I was gonna share my testimony with you guys, which is something that's not super easy for me to do. I have a habit of rambling and talking too much, so I'm gonna try to keep this under 10 minutes. So bear with me. So something that you all may not know about me is that I actually grew up in a Christian household. My parents are converted Christians. They did not grow up Christian, but they, in their adult life, found Christ, and then had me go to church with them. Which was always really fun for me because I loved my church friends, and like those were some of my sisters and brothers, and it was really fun, and not in the like spiritual way, but just in the, hey, we're a bunch of kids around the same age and we're all growing up together and having a ton of fun. And so I think it's fair to say that I enjoyed going to church not because I enjoyed Christ. It was just because I loved seeing my friends and the extended community that I, got to meet from that. And you could say I was a little bit of a powerhouse, little Christian powerhouse, because, I would go up and say, verses from memory, like I had verses memorized. I, was even a preacher child to the point where they wanted to take me on tour at one point because they thought my sermons were so good and thought that they were so profound that they could bring people to Christ. And so that was the plan for a little bit, but my parents put a hold on that. They said, no, this isn't the route we want Kelly to go for now. She's too young. And so it didn't happen, but that was even a route that I was going for a little while. And even when things got tough as a kid, I had this, they call it childlike faith for a reason. I had such amazing faith. And looking back, I'm so jealous of who I used to be because I just made it seem so easy. And I wish I could go back to all of that innocence. There was even a point in my family where it got really hard, where my dad made a mistake many, many years ago, and ended up having to pay for that by going to a detention center for a little while, to the point where he was even running the risk of being deported at one point. And even through that rough time, my dad was essentially taken away from me for about 9 months. I still had faith in God. I was obviously sad, very sad that my dad wasn't around. I'm daddy's little girl, and so this was the first time we were ever going to be apart for any longer than like a couple hours when he went to work. So when he was in jail, essentially, it was really hard on me and my mom, and I really missed him, but I felt like God still brought people into my life during that time. The elders at the church, community members, were taking care of me and my mom. And I found, there were these people who became like step-in dads for me, who just made sure I was okay, made sure I had a great time, despite missing my dad constantly. And even through that, I kept so much faith in God. I remember I used to pray. I read a verse one time, I can't remember where it was, but it said, where one or two are praying, that's where God is. And when I read that, I was like, okay, I figured out the formula. And I remember telling my Christian friends, my church kids, the kids who were my friends at church, I was like, I'll pay you $1 to pray with me. I started giving people $1 to pray with me. So my dad, so my dad would get out of jail. And that's just how much faith I had in God. I read that one thing and I knew he was going to provide. And I think God definitely answered my prayers there, because he allowed my dad to be released. My dad was supposed to serve years, and my dad was released within 9 months. And yet some could say, that was just, you had great lawyers, which we did. But keep in mind that we were a low-income family, and, just God provided in so many different ways. And my dad was out, and I got my dad back. And so, I made so many promises to God during that time, and just like knew that he was around. I loved him. I thought, God, wow, God is awesome. He provides. And again, my faith was there. When they say a little grain of, if you had just a little bit of faith, you could move mountains. I truly believe that, because my faith was big when I was a kid, and I definitely I feel like my dad getting out of jail was pretty much moving a mountain. And so yeah, again, a bit of a powerhouse, even through all of that. And then I got older, and I started hitting puberty, and then it felt like there was this kind of competition, and all of the adults would go and be like, Kelly's the prettiest, Kelly's the nicest, Kelly's so like sweet, Kelly's so blah blah blah, and they would tell my parents like, oh, we want our kids to be like yours. If we had 1,000 like Kelly, which like was great for my parents because they got all these compliments, and I also liked it. I enjoyed having somewhat, like being acknowledged for once, but the other youth, specifically the girls, didn't particularly like that, so it led to me being frozen out. And I still kept going to church. I felt very alone and sad, but kept going to church because I was still a minor. My parents still dragged me. I didn't really have a choice. And so I found something else that I enjoyed, and it was working with kids at the church, the kids' church. And that was a really great time for me. I mean, I loved those kids. I felt like I was really serving God, and I used to think that was the only thing keeping me with God. It was the only way that I could serve him. Because I knew that I wasn't fully in. I knew that I was I was listening to music that wasn't Christian. I was doing things, like I was a kid, but still like didn't identify as a Christian. And so I get emotional, but yeah, working with those kids was almost my saving grace, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it, and the kids loved me, and that made it even better. And then as I got older, like I said, there were jealousies, and I started getting pushed aside, and I wasn't the favorite to the people in charge of Sunday school or whatever. And next thing I knew, I was out. I remember showing up one day. There was a service, and I hadn't been in a couple weekends, and I remember showing up, and I saw the kids going, back to kids' church, and I thought, okay, here I am. So I got up and was told to sit down, and I was told, Kelly, we know you've been working with the kids for a while, but you weren't here the weekend when we had people sign up, and so you're no longer working with the kids. And I know that seems like a small thing, but that was sort of the tip of the iceberg for me, because that was what got me to just leave. And I remember being angry at God, being angry at Christian people, being angry at just everyone, and was just skeptical. And I would think, God, like, this was the one thing keeping me close to you. This is the one thing keeping me with you, and you just took it away from me. That felt like rejection, from people that I had grown up with, from family, pretty much. And then also rejection from God. I felt like God was saying, you know what, you're just not good enough. I don't want you. I don't even want you to serve me. So I became very angry with God and with Christians. And to me, Christians were just the worst people. They were two-faced. They were mean. They didn't care about anybody but themselves. They were in it to just try to criticize everybody. And I realized, after talking to many people now, that I'm not the only one who has felt that way towards Christians before. Unfortunately, we as Christians are flawed. We're imperfect, just trying to get by. So please forgive me if I have ever offended you in any way. That is not my intention. I'd like to take this time to pause from my testimony and just apologize if I have ever offended you or said something that is not mirroring Jesus. I realize I do that a lot. I'm still learning. I'm still growing. And just please forgive me from the bottom of my heart. So resuming my testimony, I didn't have that understanding. I made the mistake of looking at the man or as the Christians and not at Christ. And so it was very easy for me to become angry at God, and feel rejected by him. So from then on, I decided I wasn't going to be a Christian. I definitely believed in God, but I wasn't going to be a Christian. I didn't really care. I came up with my own philosophy of I am just going to do the best that I can. So I went to college. I even went far away from the church, far away from my parents. I went 6 hours away to Connecticut at Wesleyan University, which is a great school, and had a really great time. Had lots of really good friends. But when I walked away from Christ, I also there was a void in my heart. And I was trying to fill that God-sized void with other things. For me, it was boys, or the attention of boys, because I still struggled with the self-image, having gone from being the ugly duckling to then being the swan or whatever, and being rejected. Even then, I felt I had experienced rejection both in ugliness and in attractiveness and in betweens. And so I ended up trying to find validation in men, specifically my first boyfriend, and that was a relationship that lasted far too long, and it was very toxic. But I stuck with that relationship for so long because this was the first guy who had ever told me he loved me. And he was the first guy who had paid attention to me. And even though I knew I was his second choice, I didn't care because it was the first time a guy was looking at me as more than just a friend. And I ended up giving a lot to him, a lot of myself to him. And in that led to other things, and just my self-respect started going down. I started compromising and just kind of, even what little love I could get, I was okay with, as long as I still had someone. And even though I could recognize that relationship wasn't good, or other relationships that I went into later, I realized that I wasn't getting what I deserved, or at the time I thought that is what I deserved. I thought I wasn't pretty enough, smart enough, funny enough, whatever enough. And so it was just kind of conforming. And that's tough. And unfortunately, I conformed for a really long time and was, constantly searching. And so when I say that this is the first period, my year of intentional singleness, in which I haven't been, a guy hasn't been involved, I really mean it. There hasn't been a time in my life before now that I wasn't involved with a guy in some shape or form, whether it was dating, flirting, whatever, talking to them. There was someone involved. I was trying to fill this God-sized void with people, with love from people here on earth, which, people can love you all they want, but it's never going to be as much as God loves you. And so I definitely felt like during my time that I was away from God, he was definitely chasing me. He was courting me hard. And I was the one that was like, I'm not ready. And I knew he was around, and eventually I started forgiving God for the rejection that I felt he had expressed towards me by taking me out of the kids' church. Towards the end of my sophomore year, I decided that I wanted to go study abroad. When I decided I wanted to study abroad, I said, that was the first time I ever was like, I need God on this. Because even throughout the dislike and the frustration with God, I still didn't forget that he was powerful. And so I remember kneeling for one of the first times and just said, hey, if this isn't your plan, let me go. I'd really love to do it. It's a dream of mine. And a few months later, I found out I was going. And that was the first time that I felt God was saying, I'm with you. I love you. I got you. And we're going to do great things together. And I went to Italy. It was a dream come true. It was all beautiful. It was wonderful. That was the time in my life where I felt the most beautiful, the smartest, the coolest. I met my best friend there. I traveled all over Italy, parts of Europe as well. I did so much traveling. And every time, there were many trips that I did that were solo trips, where you would think, solo, you feel alone. And those were the times where I felt God manifesting himself in me the most, because he never made me feel alone. I always met someone along the way, just wonderful people who would just take me in for the day, or just kind of whatever, just made me feel like I could make friends anywhere. And that was definitely God's grace looking back on it. And I remember, anyone I spoke to about that trip, I'd say that was my gift from God. God was wanting to bless me with that. And it felt great. And then I came back, and all of that progress I had done, dancing around the possibility of becoming a Christian, kind of went away. And then came the next time that I needed him, which was when I wanted to go to Peace Corps. Said the same prayer and was, I was like, I've got it down. Like, all I have to say is, if it's your will, let it be, and if not, then it's okay. Really, I didn't mean it. I meant, if it's your will, great, because it's my will, and if not, then I'm going to figure out a way to get there. I didn't have to do that. I think it was in his plan for me to do these things. But anyway, and so I ended up going to Peace Corps for a year. It was a really great time. I did a lot of growing, a lot of self-reflecting. And it was cool. And I remember, but a year into it, I decided, my mom was having some health issues, and I decided that it was time to come back, which was a really hard decision because this was my gift from God that I was essentially turning away. And so I did a lot of praying, third time, did a lot of praying, and was like, should I come back? What should I do? And I remember in one of those prayers, I said, God, I'm going to come back to you someday. I don't know when that's going to be, but I'm going to come back. I'm going to be a Christian, and this time it's going to be for real. I'm not going to be one of those lukewarm people who's in 1 month, out the other, in 1 year, out the other. I'm going to be fully in. I'm going to serve you. I'm going to commit to you. Everything's going to be amazing. We're going to do great things. But I said, but it needs to be after I'm married, because that's when all of the fun stuff, all of the fun stuff is done. Clearly that didn't happen. I am not married. And there's still fun stuff going on. So, goes to show just God's plan is God's plan and not my own. And so anyway, so I came back, and I remember feeling really lost. Like, I got into a job that I absolutely hated. But I met this one girl. Her name was Sophia. She worked at my job, and within the first week, I think I came back knowing I needed friends. And so I was trying really hard to make friends with the people in my office, and she was one of those people that I ended up being friends with, and we ended up going to get bubble tea that first Friday. I was so disappointed with the job. I was fed up. 1 week into the job, and I was like, I'm done. I don't like this job. So we got bubble tea, and somehow we started talking about faith and spirituality. And she started telling me about how, she was a Christian. And I immediately was like, Christian, I don't know about that, but whatever. I need friends, so we're just gonna try. And I got invited to her church. I was very hesitant about it, but I still showed up because I was like, Kelly, you need friends. Like, if you can't, you beggars can't be choosers, is pretty much what I was telling myself. So I went, and I showed up to MCF and met all these wonderful people who were super nice. Almost too nice. I was like, why are they so nice? This can't be real. Like, they're not that nice. When's their shoe gonna drop? Well, guys, a year later, and the second shoe hasn't dropped. These people have been amazing, wonderful people, God-fearing people, God-serving people who each and every day teach me, just how to follow Christ better. They teach me that it's okay to have all these doubts, all of these tumultuous times with God. They've just taught me so much in this past year, and I am so glad that I get to call them my dear and very great friends. And so I started going. I was still skeptical, but I felt like every time I heard a sermon from Pastor Jeff, it just touched me. I remember the first ever one I heard, I was in tears just because I felt it was what I needed to hear. It was the moral of the story of his sermon that day was God's got this, leave it all to him and he's got it. And I remember I was like, I needed that. I needed to know that he was working, that he was going to figure stuff out, that he was going to get me into a better job, that I was going to be okay. And I am an impatient person, and God definitely taught me patience. So he made me wait 3 months for my new job, the one that I'm at now, that I actually genuinely enjoy. But even then, it took me about 3 months to even decide I wanted to be a Christian, because I met these people in November, and I didn't actually accept Christ until January 9th of 2020. This was a turning point for me. So I said the prayer. I really meant it at Panera. Nothing special. I wasn't at church. I wasn't at it wasn't this big thing, but I still remember that table we were sitting at with Nadine, and that's where I accepted Christ. And the world was going on around me, but I was different from that moment on. I look back at my life before him, which is pretty recent. It's only a year ago. my life wasn't bad. My life was good. I was doing well. I was having fun. But there was still that void that I was trying to fill. And I would say that that void has been filled in many ways. I do feel loved, and I think in learning to love God, I'm learning to love myself more and more. And I'm at a point now where, yes, I love my friends, my Christian friends, and they're really great, and they're definitely guiding me in this walk that's not easy but great. But they are not my motivation to seek Christ. And while it's been a little bit, my life isn't necessarily easier, it is better in many ways, and I've hit lots of slumps. I've been going through a slump right now, which I can talk about later, but even through that, I find that I'm not running away from God like I have in the past. I'm actually trying to run towards Him. And that's a huge change, because in the past I was a flight person, fight or flight. I was like, flight, I'm done. Like, if things weren't going well, I was just gonna leave. But that is not the case right now. And I think a lot of that has to do with Him, and with the decision that I've made to devote my life to Him. And I look forward to what else God has in store for me. And like I said, I've been going through a little bit of a tumultuous time, but I'm getting through. I've got God-fearing friends, and they also turn into mentors, and I have other mentors as well. And so I'm going through this new series in which I'm going to be interviewing my friends and asking them some of these deep questions that I've been asking myself. I'm going to have some of them answer them first, and then I'm going to do another video towards the end of the series in which I will answer the questions for myself after a little bit of more reflecting. So yeah, that is my story. Sorry it's so long. I'm going to try to cut it down a little bit, but I appreciate you so much for listening to me, listening to my testimony. And if you find that you're in a situation, similar situation, any part of my life that I was in, like, you've been betrayed and hurt by the church, which I find is not that uncommon. If you find that you've been hurt by the church, or if you find that you haven't found your people that that motivate you to go and find Christ, I encourage you to, check out my church, MCF. It's such a great community if you're in the DMV area. If not, I encourage you to do some research, and at least watch sermons online. I mean, Elevation Church has some really good sermons. I'm sure there's a bunch of other ones. If you're a woman, there's Proverbs 31, I think, is one of the organizations, and there's just so many wonderful resources. And please feel free to reach out to me. I don't know how much wisdom I can impose, bring to you, considering I'm only a year in, but if I can be of any help, even just a sounding board, please feel free to DM me or comment down below or whatever. I'll link my Instagram and whatever, Facebook down below. So anyway, thank you so much. I'm gonna stop yammering now, and I appreciate you so much. I will see y'all later. Please share, like, and subscribe. If maybe if this didn't touch you, maybe it reaches someone else. And the liking and subscribing definitely helps me out. So anywho, see y'all next week. And I hope y'all enjoyed. Bye.